On the behalf of IEEE NTC Student Chapter IIT Indore, I would I would welcome you in one another webinar organized by us. Today we are going to have Dr. Rahul Prajesh sir with us, who is Senior Scientist from CSI Cyril Pilani. Thank you, sir, for accepting our request for the webinar. Dr. Rahul Prajesh sir is going to give a webinar on the topic of design and development methodology of a chemi-resistive gas sensor, past, present, and future. Before the start of the event, let's just mention our sponsor, Pfeiffer Vacuum, Zagatech Corporation, Excel Instrument, Rudraksh Technologies, Optimized Solution, Streamline, and Mancha Vacuum Technologies, who are our constant support for organizing such event. Now, moving forward, here is a brief introduction of our speaker of the today's event. Dr. Rahul Pradesh sir received his PhD in Engineering Science from ACIR in 2018. He is currently working as Senior Scientist in CSIR Siri Pilani. He is a recipient of the Quick Hire Scientist Fellowship of CSIR. He is a senior member IEEE, member of IETE, and member of IE. He has published more than 40 papers in reputed journal and conference. His research interest includes semiconductor device fabrication, field effect transistor-based biosensor, and chemi-resistive gas sensor. Now I request Dr. Rahul Prajesh sir to share his screen and start with the lecture.
Thank
Participants
you.
are Participants are requested to keep the audio in mute mode during the talk and inquire the doubt at the end of the session. You may post your queries in the chat box during the talk.
Okay, thank you, Ruchi.
Thank you, sir.
And first of all, thanks to Sanjay and all his team for organizing this webinar. Let me share my screen first. Okay, are the slides visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so very good morning, everyone. Today, basically, we will discuss about the chemi-resistive gas sensor. I will discuss the methodology part of it, not what I have done so far, but I will basically cover how you can make a complete gas sensor starting from the scratch and what are the basic design parameters you should consider for making a good gas sensor device. Gas sensor, I mean to say, is metal oxide based chemi-resistive gas sensor. Okay. So this is the just a minute. Sorry, actually my wife is admitted to hospital and I have to take call urgently. Sorry for that. Okay, so we were discussing about the gas sensors. So for today's talk, the outline will be, I'll discuss about the what are sensors and actuators, what are different design parameters, and how a sensor performance is rated based on what parameters. Then I'll discuss the fabrication technology which is being used in this type of particular gas sensors, and that is MEMS technology. I'll discuss brief about the MEMS technology. Then we'll discuss about the metal oxide gas sensors and what are future opportunities for PhD students, MTech students in this particular area. So before I start the presentation, let me share this wonderful quote by Peter Drucker, which says, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So basically, to improve on something, you first need to measure it. For example, you want to improve the pollution quality. So you need to first measure the pollution quality. Okay, then only you can improve it. For example, you want to measure your weight. So first you need to improve your weight. First you need to measure your weight. So that's why sensors are so important in nowadays life to improve a particular condition or situation. So measure and improve. So you need to have a sensor, and then you need to have a corrective action to improve it. So what is a sensor? Sensor is basically a technological device that can detect a signal which is in very small quantity, or it may be a physical quantity, it may be a chemical quantity. Okay. Now, when we talk about sensors, we can see there are different senses we are like given by God: sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. These are natural sensors. And nowadays, people are trying to biomimic these sensors to improve the quality of sensors. That is called biomimic, or basically biomechanics is used. Biomimicking of the actual sensory organs, we can make future sensors, which are very important, very highly sensitive, and give very good response. Now, it is important to understand what is the difference between a sensor and a transducer. So this is a basic map which gives us the idea why sensors are so important in the international market and what is the importance. So if you see in China and Japan, India, these are very like consuming sensors in a very good amount. So the sensors are very important in all these countries as well as all the other countries in the world. These are typical example of sensors where you see thermometer, thermocouple, phototransistors, microphones. So basically, sensor, it takes one form of energy that is called any quantity, physical, chemical, or optical, and converts it into electrical energy. That is called sensor. And if you talk a broader term, that is transducer, in that you convert one form of energy to another form of energy. So basically, sensor is a subset of transducers. Or you can say sensor plus actuator is basically transducer. So these are, if you talk about sensor, you take any physical, chemical, or optical quantity and convert it to electrical output. On the other hand, if you have electrical input and you get the mechanical output out of it, that is called actuator. So combination of sensor and actuator can be called as transducer because this converts one form of energy to another form of energy. Okay, now it is important to understand what are different parameters to measure the quality of a sensor. Now, first we should understand what is sensitivity. Sensitivity, sometimes it's also called as the response. So this is basically the slope of the characteristic curve where you have input quantity and output quantity. The slope gives you the sensitivity of the sensor. Another important parameter is accuracy and precision. You all must be knowing about this graph, but I'll revise your concepts. So basically this, if you look at this measurement, this is highly accurate as well as precise. On the other hand, if you see this one, this is very precise because the values are close to each other. Means the measurements are repeatable, but it is away from the actual value. So this is not accurate. Again, there is third example where the average of all the points will come at the center, means it's almost accurate, but it's very less precise because the values are not very close to each other. The fourth one says it's not at all accurate or nor it is precise because the values are not averaging at the center and also they are not close to each other. So this is you need to understand when you deal with a sensor, it should be very precise, it should be very accurate, and the sensitivity should be high. Now there are more parameters to understand a sensor. This is the error, which is given by the difference between measured and actual value. Then linearity of the sensor is also important because when you draw the calibration curve of the sensor, and if it is linear, then only you are able to predict some values based on the sensor output. Also the response time. And as you all know, the response time is time taken to reach 90% of the saturation value is the response time, and similarly the recovery time. Once you reach the steady state, 90% of the steady state value, that is the recovery time. Now we have a good picture of the different parameters of sensor. What are sensors, transducers? You need to understand what is the technology, what is the important technology that is being used to fabricate these type of sensors, and that is MEMS. Okay. So how, from where MEMS has come? So it is the derivative of VLSI fabrication technology only. But VLSI fabrication technology was more focused on making transistors, diodes, and all that stuff. Okay, but MEMS technology is specifically designed for making sensors, different type of sensors, micro electromechanical systems. This is called. There are different terms like micro electromechanical system. So if you understand it more closely, this deals with micro dimensions and electromechanical devices. In Japan, it's also called as micro machines, and Europe, it's also referred as microsystem technologies. So this is the idea of micro electromechanical systems. You are dealing with electromechanical systems in micro domain, and to fabricate this, what processes you use are called MEMS fabrication processes. So just to give an idea, what is a micro dimension? This may be very basic for you all of you. Like this is the typical size of a human hair. If you see, this is the human, and if you see the human hair, this is somewhere around 100 micron. Now, below this, we are talking about MEMS. So it is 1 mm to 100 nanometer. This is the typical range for working in the MEMS area. Okay, when you talk about these sensors have dimensions in this particular range. What are the different applications of MEMS? So this is very first type of MEMS device which was fabricated long back, and this was a micro nozzle for inkjet printer. This is a MEMS device, very first micro MEMS device. Another example is DMDs, where you see these DMDs in projectors, high-end projectors, and you can project light in any particular angle based on the deflection made by the micrometers, digital micrometer devices. You see this micro accelerometer, and their application of accelerometers are typically seen in airbags. So as soon as there are sudden brakes from a moving object, if suddenly comes to a halt, then these airbags are deployed. And how to measure that particular sudden brake? That is measured by the accelerometer. Okay, this is a good application of a MEMS sensor in real life application. Other examples are gyroscopes, MEMS gyroscope. You must have seen in your mobile phones, once you rotate the phone, it is automatically takes the position of portrait or landscape mode. That is governed by the MEMS gyroscope. That is inbuilt in the smartphones. Another example is tire pressure monitoring. So if you take MEMS pressure sensor, you can install them on different tires, and you can monitor the pressures in real time of the tires. This is another very good example of the MEMS-based sensors. One more example is CMUT device, capacitively micro machine ultrasonic transducers. So these are capacitive transducers where you see these are used to measure the non-destructive testing of major structures. For example, bridges, walls, very big structures. For example, nuclear reactors. These type of structures, you cannot go there and individually check the cracks. But using CMUT based devices, transducer devices, you can actually check where are the cracks in the building or structure. These devices are very useful measuring this type of cracks. Okay, so these are some examples of the MEMS based devices. Now, why are we talking about the MEMS sensors? Why this technology is so important? Now, this is very important because you can make very small size sensors, and small size means you can pack very much large quantity of sensors on a single whip. So that will give you more yield, more throughput, and it will be low cost. Okay, if you can pack more devices on a same wafer, that will reduce the cost as well as effort. So this is one advantage. Another advantage is you can make so small devices. That means you can reduce the power consumption. Okay, And if these devices are very small, you must have read about these in nanotechnology or so. Like if you reduce the size, most of the time surface to volume ratio decreases, and because of that sensitivity of the sensor increases. So there are so many advantages of making the devices small. You can reduce power, you can reduce size, you can improve the sensitivity. So that's why MEMS is so important, and you don't make these sensors in normal workshops. You can make most of these sensors in workshop also, but that will be a big sensor and that will require more power. It will take more size, throughput will be less, and it will be costly compared to these MEMS devices. So there are so many advantages of using MEMS technology. Now, how this is done? So in very simple picture, if we keep this, we start from sand and we end up with a sensor. So this is coming out of nowhere. It is coming just from the sand. How it is done? You process this sand in such a way that you make very good silicon wafers out of it. And how that is done? There are different processes. You must have read about it. Czochralski method, float zone method. There are different methods of making silicon wafers. Like if you see over here, this is the sand. This is melted at a very high temperature so that you get a metallurgical grade silicon out of this silica. Then you get polycrystalline silicon. You heat it in form of ingot, and you get a cylindrical shape polycrystalline or single crystalline silicon. Out of that, you get silicon wafers of desired size and desired resistivity. Okay, these wafers are further processed using semiconductor fabrication processes. And just to keep it simple, you just have to remember three things. One is deposition, another is patterning and etching. So these are the most important processes of semiconductor fabrication technology: deposition, patterning, and etching. So first, if you take the very simple example of PCB, where you see a copper film is deposited in PCB substrate, then that is patterned using the photosensitive material, or sometimes direct writing using CNC machines or a drilling method. And then you remove the unwanted material, that is etching. So you deposit copper on it, you pattern it using lithography or any other technique, and then you remove the unwanted material. So these are the important steps of fabrication process. There are other methods, other processes also, which are equally important, but these three are the backbone, I would say, backbone of the fabrication technology. Then there is chemical mechanical polishing or planarization, which is very important, ion implantation or diffusion, which is used to achieve a particular resistivity of the substrate. Now, if you understand the sensor, MEMS technology, and different fabrication process, now we can come onto metal oxide gas sensors, how these are made and what are the different parameters to design these type of sensors. So first of all, why we need these type of sensors? Why we need gas sensors? So you must remember this photo, very old photo. This is from Bhopal gas tragedy. There are other different cuttings from newspaper I have taken, and you would see like there have been lots of incidences in the past which could have been avoided if proper gas sensors were installed. Okay, this shows the need of these type of devices. So there have been a lot of examples from the past. That means we need the gas sensors in a lot of areas. These are very important for us. And what are these areas? These are used for process control industries where you have silane, ammonia, such type of gases. You can use them for environmental monitoring where you need CO, COX, NOx, SOx, methane, these type of gases to monitor. You can use them for fire detection where you need to measure CO and CO2 most of the times. Alcohol detection, drink and drive cases like alcohol is very important to detect. Detection of harmful gases in mines. Home safety. And nowadays, a futuristic application of gas sensor is coming. That is disease diagnostic from breath. So if you have very high sensitive gas sensors, you can detect disease from breath. I'll discuss more about that in the later section of this presentation. So first, let's discuss what is a gas sensor and why I have shown this dog cartoon and this bird. What is this bird doing over here? So basically, gas sensor is basically our nose. And our nose has lots of receptors which detects a gas, and our brain decodes that particular gas with predefined patterns in our brain and detects and tells us what we are smelling. So this is the immediate process what happens in our mind and nose. The same thing is being done, but with a very high sensitivity in dog nose, because that has more number of receptors than a human nose. That's why dog nose is very sensitive compared to human nose. And what is the importance of this canary bird? So this is basically the ancient time gas sensor. This is a canary bird. Now, what is the importance of canary bird? In old times, when there were no technology for mines, people used to send this canary bird. This canary bird sounds a humming sound, continuous humming sound, and they used to send this canary bird into mine. And if the humming sound stops, they would sense that there is some hazardous gas inside the mine and you should not go inside the mine. And if canary bird comes back singing as it was sent, that means the environment is safe and you can go inside. So that was that time gas sensor, canary bird. So this is past that I wrote in my title also. What is the past of gas sensor? This is the past of gas sensor. Earlier, this was the gas sensor used. Then they used to use laltens. So they used to take that lalten inside using some long rods or something like that. They used to take that lalten inside, and if there is less oxygen present in the mines, that lalten will go off. Because of the absence of oxygen, the light will not glow and that light will go off. So that was another indication, the advanced version of gas sensor after the canary bird. And later on, there were technologies available, and then I will discuss what were the different technologies available after that. So what are different technologies for gas sensor? So first there was canary bird, then there was lalten used, and then there are different technologies available as the science advanced. So there was resistive gas sensors, capacitive gas sensors, acoustic gas sensors, and optical gas sensors. In resistive gas sensors, we use the change in resistance to measure the gas concentration. In capacitive gas sensors, we use the change of dielectric constant, and we relate that change in dielectric constant to the gas concentration. Then there is acoustic gas sensor. So resonant frequency of the particular system or sensor is used to measure the gas concentration. And on the other hand, in optical gas sensors, we use the absorption, reflectance, or refractive index, these type of parameters to judge the concentration of gas. Now, out of these technologies, resistive gas sensors are most popular because of their simplicity, and you just need a material and two electrodes to measure the resistance of that particular material. And if you can measure the resistance, that means you can make a gas sensor easily. Now, I'll go more into more details later on, but this is the simplest type of gas sensor which is available in the market. Now, if we talk about resistive gas sensors, what are the important parts of this gas sensors, resistive type of gas sensors? So there are two important parts, or I would say components. First is microheater. What is the role of this microheater? I will discuss. Another part is sensing film, sensing layer. So microheater and sensing layer. These two are very important parts of the gas sensor. In sensing part, there are another two important parameters. One is the material and second is the electrodes. So you want to measure the resistance. That means there should be some material of which you want to measure the resistance. And how to measure the resistance? That means you need electrodes. Okay. And in this type of sensors, we use interdigital electrodes. So you can use two terminals also, two simple electrodes you can use. But why we use interdigital electrodes? That is basically in these materials, the resistance is very high. And once we make the interdigital type of structure, there are multiple resistances in parallel. Because of that, resistance goes down and comes into the measurable range. Normally, the resistance is very high and it is difficult to measure. But when we use the interdigital electrodes, it is easier to measure the resistance. That's why we use interdigital electrodes. There is another important importance of using interdigital electrodes. That is, if you use interdigital electrodes, the surface area will increase because of the roughness created by these electrodes. The surface area will increase, and that increased surface area will help you in sensitivity. So there are two important benefits of using interdigital electrodes. Now, as I was discussing, so you have a substrate, then you have micro heater, then you have passivation layer, so that your micro heater and electrodes are not shorted. So you have electrical insulation between them. Then you have a sensing film. So this is a typical structure of a chemiresistive gas sensor. Now, what is the use of micro heater over here? We understand that you need a sensing film which will be sensitive to a gas, and you need electrodes to measure the resistance. But a gas is adsorbed on a particular surface, sensing film, at a particular temperature only. Okay, so you need to elevate the temperature so that the adsorption of the gas on the surface is easy. So that particular temperature is called the operating temperature, and that temperature is provided by the microheaters. And if you talk about the journey of these type of resistive gas sensors, so first there were these Taguchi type of gas sensors. In these type of gas sensors, there was a ceramic tube. On ceramic tube, there was a coating of sensing layer on top, and two terminals were taken. There was no interdigital electrodes in the past. Only two terminals were taken, and inside that ceramic tube, there was a filament that works as the heater, micro heater. Okay, so this is tubular type of gas sensor which was used long back in 60s. Then comes the thick film type of gas sensors. In thick film type of gas sensors, what we do, we take a substrate. This blue color is substrate, and in the bottom side we keep the micro heater, and on the top side we keep the sensing film and electrodes. So bottom side heater gives you the particular temperature, and on top side gas is adsorbed on sensing film, and electrodes helps you to measure the resistance. So this is the thick film type of gas sensor. Another third technology which is currently being used is the thin film technology. So in thin film technology, what people are doing, they are keeping micro heater as well as interdigital electrodes and sensing film on the same side. Why this is being done? Because once you keep the micro heater on the other side, the complete substrate is heated. The complete substrate is heated. That means you need more power to reach a particular temperature. So the power losses are high. To reduce those power losses, what they do, they keep the micro heater and interdigital electrode on the same side. Also, they remove the material from the back so that only small thickness is heated. So you must have read about the Joule heating. So in Joule heating, this is related to MS delta T. So there, M is thermal mass. Okay, so thermal mass, if it should be very low, so that the power consumption is less to achieve a particular temperature. So these three are the journey of gas sensors after the Laltane, Canary Bird, Laltane, and then we will see this Taguchi type gas sensor, thick film technology, and thin film technology, which is currently being used. Now, currently the research is mostly going on this particular sensing film. What should be the proper sensing film? The other technology is almost there. This is well proven and well established technology, which is there. Only the interesting part which is being explored right now is the sensing film. Now, if we move further and understand the working of these type of gas sensors. So as I told earlier, micro heater provides the required temperature so that this gas gets absorbed on the surface, and electrodes measure the resistance of the sensing film once the gas is absorbed on the surface. We'll understand this in more detail, and we'll see once this gas is absorbed on the surface, there are two things happening on the surface. One is it may be oxidized or it may be reduced. So if it is oxidized, the surface is oxidized, that means there is loss of electron. That means resistance will increase. Or if there is reduction of the surface, that means electron gain is happening and resistance will decrease. So you need to understand which type of gas is absorbing on the surface and what it will do to the surface. It may increase the resistance or decrease the resistance. So accordingly, we will judge what type of gas is present on the surface. It is oxidizing gas or reducing gas. And the amount of this change, resistance change, is basically related to the concentration of gas. Now, if we go more deep into the physics of it, you will see these metal oxides, if we take the example of SnO2, are mostly polycrystalline in nature. So polycrystalline means there are multiple grains, and so there are grain boundaries. And this adsorption of gases takes place mostly on the grain boundaries. So if you have more number of grain boundaries in your sample, you will have more adsorption of gases. So this gives you one design parameter. That is, how much should be the grain size? You should have more grains or you should have less grains. More grains means more grain boundaries. More grain boundaries means more adsorption. More adsorption means more sensitivity of the film. So that means you should have smaller size of grains and more grains on the particular area. Okay, so if it is a reducing gas, what will happen? It will give electron to the surface and it will decrease the resistance. So this is straightforward. Now, how it is decreasing the resistance? It is important to understand that there is a barrier created at the grain boundary. So this barrier, EV, electron volts, this barrier height will reduce if it is a reducing gas, or it will increase if it is an oxidizing gas. And this barrier is directly related to the resistance of the film. Okay. Now, how to design a gas sensor? Now, you need to understand that there are three important categories of the specifications. First category is electrical specifications, then physical specifications, and what are the sensing parameters? What are the different gases you want to measure? So, what is the operating voltage? What should be the current? What is the maximum resistance of your micro heater? What is the initial resistance? So based on that, you can calculate if you have, for example, if you have operating voltage 5 volt, that is fixed, and maximum current that is allowed is this much. So based on that, you can calculate the maximum resistance. And if that is known to you, and what is the temperature required for a particular gas that is known to you, you can calculate the R naught based on the formula R is equals to R naught 1 plus alpha delta T. That is a standard resistance equation, which is temperature dependent resistance. Okay. So if your resistance is temperature dependent, your equation will be this only. R equals to R naught 1 plus alpha delta T, where alpha is the TCR. So if you know the TCR of the material and the temperature is known, you can calculate the initial resistance of your material, your micro heater. Okay. And then based on that, you calculate your geometrical parameters. What should be the line width? What should be your length of the coil, micro heater coil? What should be the thickness? And then you define your concentration ranges. Okay. So these are the different specifications which are important for designing the a gas sensor. Now let's take the first part of it. First is micro heater. Now for micro heater, it's basically a resistance, a metal resistor, where you need different a very stable material and a very good uniform temperature across the sensing film. So keeping that in mind, you have two important parameters. One is the resistance. What should be the resistance? As I discussed earlier, resistance is important for a micro heater. Second is the geometry. So what should be the geometry of the micro heater so that you get the uniform temperature across the sensing film. So your complete sensing film should be at the same temperature. Otherwise, the gas adsorption will not be same for all the sensing film. So this is very important to understand. Now, what are the different geometries available in literature? So it may be double spiral, it may be S shape, it may be fan shape, and there are other geometries also. Like there may be circular type of geometries available also. So based on the literature available and what my experience says, double spiral geometry is most of the time used for ease of fabrication, as well as it gives you the uniform temperature across the sensing field. Okay, so once you decide the geometry, it is important to understand what should be the material for micro heater. Now there are different options. It may be of platinum, it may be nichrome, it may be tungsten. Now, how to choose this material? What should be the reliable material for micro heater application? You want to heat a particular metal, what should be the material? So out of these three, platinum is a noble material and it doesn't get oxidized easily. Whereas nichrome can get oxidized, tungsten can also get oxidized. And if they can get oxidized, the property of these materials will change with respect to time. But for a reliable micro heater, these properties should not change. Okay, so that's why we choose most of the times platinum as the micro heater element or material. As you can see, this is a typical structure, double spiral structure of platinum made in what we make in series. Now, you can also check the geometry and its uniformity using simulations. So you can use COMSOL simulations to make these structures and see if the temperature is uniform in the desired area or not. Okay, so you make that structure, what you want to design, what you want to fabricate. First, you should simulate that and see if the temperature is a good temperature is achieved at a particular power consumption or not. And based on that, you can fine tune your design. So this is what I was talking about. The working principle of micro heater is basically the Joule heating. So this is the electrical energy which we supply, and this is the conversion of that electrical energy into thermal energy, which depends on the M, which is thermal mass, S specific heat, and delta T. This is the temperature raised due to the heat, the electrical energy applied. And this electrical energy goes to thermal energy as well as losses. So there are conduction losses, convection losses, and radiation losses. So these losses are also important. Conduction losses, convection losses, and radiation losses. And in gas sensor application, we mostly deal with the temperature that is up to 400 degrees centigrade or so. And up to 400 degrees centigrade, radiation losses are not so important, and only we consider the conduction and convection losses. And most importantly, the conduction losses, because there is so much material in contact that takes the power, electrical energy into heat dissipation. For that, what we do, we remove the material from the back side by using bulk micromachining, and only this particular membrane is remaining, so that the thermal mass is less. So if the thermal mass is less, you can get more temperature for a given input power. To remove thermal mass, we do the bulk micromachining from the back side, and we make the sensor on a very thin membrane, so that the thermal mass is very low. This is a typical example of simulation. Here you can see in this particular structure, I have not removed the thermal mass from the back side, and you see the temperature is only 30 degrees centigrade. But on the other side, if you see this one, here I have removed the thermal mass from the back side, and it's a very thin membrane, and for a given power, the temperature is now 585 degrees centigrade. So you see there is a huge difference between the two. So this is the advantage of removing thermal mass from the back side. So that's why it is important to do the bulk micromachining and make the structure, micro heater and ID and sensing film only on a thin membrane. And that is only possible with the help of MEMS technology. Now, another important parameter is the cavity size. What should be the cavity area corresponding to the active area? So this is the active area where you have your sensing film, and this is the cavity size from the back side. Now, what should be the ratio between these two? This is very important, and I did some simulation and which suggests that your cavity to active area ratio should be more than 1.5. If you see, when it is less than 1, the temperature is very low. When it goes beyond 1, the temperature rise rapidly, and after 1.5 or 2, it almost saturates. So 1.5, making cavity size 1.5 times the active area, gives you a decent thermal power consumption. Also, it gives you good mechanical stability. Now, if you increase it further, your wafer will be very fragile, and you will have large membranes hanging, only 1-2 micron membranes hanging very wide. So that will be very fragile kind of structure. So mechanical strength reduces as you go further, but there is no important advantage of power consumption. So it is important to keep this in 1.5 to 2 aspect ratio. So just to give you a more feel what I am talking about, this is the active area. If you see, this is the active area of micro heater, and this, the border line, tells the cavity window. This is the cavity window. So if you see, this cavity window is sometimes larger than the active area. So this is what I'm talking about. This should be 1.5 times or larger, greater than the active area. Okay. And another important parameter is what should be the membrane thickness. What should be the membrane thickness for a optimum power consumption to achieve a good temperature. Now, if you see over here in this graph, this is power versus temperature. And here I have fabricated 4 different structures. One is when you have 9 micron silicon left at the back, 9 micron membrane, 9 micron silicon left at the back. So it's basically you are removing silicon from the back. And what is the thickness of this membrane? So when you have 9 micron silicon left, this is the curve. You are getting this much temperature at 200 milliwatt. Then reduce the silicon. You make it 6 micron, 3 micron. And you see there is a drastic improvement when there is no silicon left and only oxide membrane is there. So if you see, this is 700 degrees centigrade at only 135 or 145, 140 milliwatt power. So summary is your cavity size should be more than 1.5 times of the active area, and there should not be any silicon left behind the oxide membrane. There should be no silicon left. There should be zero silicon. Then only you will get the best output of your micrometer. Now, next important component. As I talked about the important components, one is the micro heater, another one is sensing film and electrodes. So let's talk about the interdigital electrodes. As I told you, why we keep this interdigital electrodes? Because based on that, the net resistance is the resistance of the films is reduced by a factor of n-1 square, where n is the number of fingers. So basically, mean to say is the initial resistance of the sensing film is very high, which is difficult to measure. But when we use interdigital electrodes, this is reduced by a very good margin. Very good margin, it is reduced, and you can easily measure the resistance. That's the importance of measuring using interdigital electrodes. And if you take the cross section out of here, if you draw a line out here, so you will see that this line will be in this type. This will be a wavy line. That means you have more surface. If you increase the density of these fingers, you will have more roughness on the surface. More roughness means more surface area, and you will have more sensitivity. So this is the second advantage of having interdigital electrodes. Then you talk about the sensing film. So we have talked about micro heater, we have talked about electrodes. Now it is important to understand what are the different parameters we should understand to make a good sensing film. Okay, so most of the time these sensing films are metal oxide sensing films where we use tantalum pentoxide, tin oxide, zinc oxides, and different type of other oxides. And nowadays we are also using 2D materials where we are using MOS2, MOSE2, these type of WS2, these type of 2D materials to use them in sensing application. Now, why we use 2D materials? It is very well understood that the surface to volume ratio of these nanostructures is very high and hence the sensing is very high. Okay. Now, if you talk about normal thin films, the standard thin films, sputtered thin films or evaporated thin films, there are different parameters you should understand. What first is the stoichiometry of what is the stoichiometry you are targeting? Are you able to achieve that or not? Second is the thickness. This is also very important for sensing application. What is the grain size? This is another important parameter, and the resistivity. So you need to understand what is the different parameters to make a good sensing film. I'll discuss about them individually. So stoichiometry is often understood by the XRD, or you can understand that by EDX or XPS. Now you need to understand whether you are able to achieve a good stoichiometry or not. For example, you are talking about SNO2. You are able to make SNO2 or not, or are you making SNO only, or something else is being made. So that stoichiometry is very important. Then only you will be able to achieve the desired results. Second important parameter is the thickness. So I have made some experiments on this part, and I have come to this conclusion that when you increase the thickness, sensitivity first increases, then decreases. Why it is so? Simply you can understand, if you have a very thin film, sensitivity will be high, but it will saturate very fast. So that is the one reason it will have restricted sensitivity. So initially it will increase. But once you have a very good thickness, then the reaction will be diffusion limited. And if you have very thick sensing film, the diffusion will only take on the top surface and the complete film will not be involved. And if the complete film is not involved, the sensitivity will be low. Okay, so the thickness should be such that the complete thickness of the sensing film is involved in sensing. This is very important. Please understand this. Your complete sensing film should be involved in sensing. So diffusion, you need to understand what is the diffusion depth which you are achieving. And if you are able to understand that, keep that thickness within that range only. Otherwise, what will happen? If you have extra thickness, that will go waste and will reduce the sensitivity. And if you have less thickness, that will saturate very fast. So it is very important to understand the thickness of the sensing film. Most of the time people say there is no importance of the thickness. You can deposit any thickness you want, but it is very critical. It is very critical. You should understand that. Next is the grain size. Now, why grain size is important? Now, as I told you, very simply, to understand is very simply, just understand that more number of grain boundaries helps in more absorption. And when it will happen for a given area, when you will have more number of grain boundaries, when you will have smaller grains. You have smaller grains means large number of grain boundaries and more absorption. So if you put in simple words, you should have small grain size compared to larger grain size to have very good sensitivity. And if you go deep into this, you understand the concept of Debye length, and I'll discuss that maybe in this slide or later. Though this is grain size, and another important part is resistivity of the material. As I told you earlier, if you have very high resistivity, the resistance will not be measurable, and that will not give you very good sensitivity. And if you have very low resistance, in that particular case, what will happen? The change will not be that significant. So if you see a change in very, for example, you are getting very high current. Low resistivity means high current. So if you have a change in high current, that will be very less significant. Okay. So very high resistivity is not good. Very low resistivity is also not good. So you need to understand it is very important to have optimum resistivity so that you get the significant change and also you get the measurable value. Okay. Now, based on this information, you have the information about micro heater, you have simulated it, you have understanding of the sensing film, you have understanding of the interdiscrete electrodes. Then you make your layout using whatever software you can use. You can use L-Edit or whatever it is, Clarion or whatever. You can make your layout and the masks are fabricated. So if you see over here, what are the important mask details? First layer is the heater, micro heater. Then you need to have pad opening. Then you have interdiscrete electrodes and sensing film. These are 4 to 5 mask layers which are important for making a gas sensor. So once you design the layout, then you go for fabrication. And if you understand it again, so you have a silicon substrate, then you have a electrical isolation layer, and you have micro heater, and this is a passivation layer. So this passivation layer is, please note it very carefully. This passivation layer is electrically isolating but thermally conducting. Why it is important? It should be electrically isolating so that this micro heater and interdiscrete electrodes are not shorted. And why it should be thermally conducting? It should be thermally conducting because this micro heater's heat should be easily transported to the sensing film. So this is electrically isolated and thermally insulating. Oh, sorry, thermally conducting and electrically isolated. And what is the good material for this? Silicon nitride is mostly used and it is very good material for this particular application. We don't use silicon dioxide over here, we use silicon nitride. Okay. So gas sensor fabrication, you must have like guessed by now. First is the micro heater, which is patterned. Then you make the interdiscrete electrodes. Then you put the sensing layer on the top. And at the end, you remove the material from the back side. As I discussed earlier, the thermal mass should be very low, so the power consumption is less. So this is very important to understand. So this is the complete gas sensor fabrication. So I'll repeat it once again. So you'll have a micro heater, then there are interdiscrete electrodes, and between interdiscrete electrodes and micro heater, you have a passivation layer, which is electrically isolating and thermally conducting. Then you put the sensing layer on the top. Then this cavity is formed and the material from the backside is removed so that you have less thermal mass and the power consumption is less. Now, if you see the flow of complete end-to-end device, you first make the gas sensor chip, you wire bond it onto the headers, then you completely package it into the appropriate housing, and you make the electronics out of it. So this is how a complete gas sensor flow looks like. So you make the chip, you wire bond it, you make the complete housing, and you interface it with the electronics. So this is the complete picture of the gas sensor. Now, whether your device is working fine or not, you need to understand that. And to understand that, there are different stages of characterization. Okay, as I discussed earlier, there are two important parts. One is micro heater and sensing film. You need to properly characterize these two so that you know whether the your sensor is working fine or not. So first we characterize the micro heater. What are the important characterizations? First, you calculate the TCR. What is TCR? Thermal coefficient of resistance. So that you use that TCR to calculate the current temperature of the micro heater. Now, let me tell you, this is a micro heater. You apply voltage across it and it will get some temperature across it. Now, you don't have extra temperature sensor to measure this temperature. Okay, so you can use the same micro heater to measure the temperature also, because this can also work as PRT. So that is the reason you should first calculate the TCR value, and once you calibrate your micro heater, you can get the temperature information from the same micro heater itself. In most of the papers, you will see there is a micro heater and temperature sensor separate. But I'm using the same micro heater to provide the heat as well as to measure the temperature. So that's why this is important to understand what is the calibration curve, and using this calibration curve, I can measure the temperature. Now I will use this calculation to measure the temperature of the heater. You can see this consumes very low power and very high temperature is achieved. Even if you see the 100 milliwatt power, around 600 degrees centigrade temperature is achieved in the micro heater. This is a transient response. So what are the important characterization you should do? First, you should do the TCR testing. Based on that, you can calculate the temperature of the micro heater. Then you should do the power mapping of the micro heater, at what power you are getting what temperature. Then you should see what is the transient response of your micro heater. How fast your micro heater is getting the temperature, or how fast it is cooling from the higher temperature to lower. You can see from the graph, it is only taking 6 milliseconds to heat up to a particular value of 430 degrees centigrade, and from 430 degrees centigrade to 25 degrees centigrade back to normal. So this is very fast in transient response as well. So this you should calculate, and then you should see the physical output of your micro heater using the infrared camera. So you can use the infrared camera to see the temperature mapping of the micro heater. So here you can see this this specific part. You can see this is heated, and you can use the IR meter, IR imaging camera, to measure the temperature at this particular area. And you see this temperature is very localized. It is not heating the other area, and only this part is heated. So this is very localized. That's why the power consumption is low, because it's not heating the complete substrate. Only this part is heated, and this part is very small, and thermal mass is very low. That's why the power consumption is less. Now, second important characterization comes from the sensing film. So what are the important characterization you should do for sensing film? As I told you earlier, stoichiometry is important. So you should go for XPS, EDEX, and XRD. So you should know what phase of the material you are getting, what is the crystallinity, is it polycrystalline or single crystalline? All those information you'll get from the XRD and EDEX and XPS. So that characterization you have to do. Then you have to understand what is the grain size of your material. What is the crystallite size that you can also get from the XRD, but roughly what is the grain size that you can estimate from the AFM image also. So you could go for AFM analysis. You can also go for FESM analysis for faster imaging, where you can see what is the distribution of the crystallites, or I would say grains. Okay, so you can see the crystallite distribution across the film, and you will see, are there any cracks or not? If it is a uniform film, are the grains uniform across the film? That type of information is important. That's why you should go for morphological characterization, topological characterization, as well as elemental characterizations using XRD and XPS. Okay, these are very important characterizations for sensing. Once you do all this, you have characterized your micro heater, you have characterized your sensing film, you should go then test your sensing performance of the device. Now, how to test your device? So there are two methods. One is static method, and another one is dynamic method. In static method, what we do, so first, let me first explain this diagram to you. So this is basically the sensing chamber, where you put your sensor. This is connected to a computer, where you measure the resistance of the sensing film. This is also connected to power supplies, from where you are feeding power to a micro heater, so that a particular temperature is reached. And then you have a gas flow controller. And your gas inside this chamber is being controlled by the computerized MFCs connected to this mass flow controller system. So as you see from the back side, there are multiple lines connected to the mass flow controller. And at the same time, you can put at least 3 to 4 gases into the system with precise control of flow rates. Okay. And with the help of flow rate, you can also control the ppms of the gas. So you will take the target gas and dilute it with the synthetic air, and you will feed it to the system. And proportion of the target gas and synthetic gas will give you different ppm values. Okay, so you can measure the resistance of your sensor at different concentration values. Okay, so this is basically setup. In this setup, you can go for static and dynamic. What is static? In static, what we do, we push the gas inside the chamber and lock it there, and the gas is locked. And in locked condition, we measure the resistance. That is called static measurement. And dynamic measure, we continuously feed the gas into the chamber, and the continuous gas comes out from the chamber. So continuous in and out. That is called dynamic measurement. So both have their own advantages and disadvantages. In some cases, when you have limited amount of gas, you cannot do dynamic measurement because you need continuous supply of gas. You go for static measurements. You just push the gas inside the chamber and test your sensor and flush it later on. But if you have sufficient amount of gas and you want a very robust kind of testing of your device, you go for dynamic measurements. Okay. So this is a schematic, further explained schematic of the setup. As you see, you have a gas and a cylinder. Then this is the inlet of this is the chamber, and in chamber you have a gas sensor. This may be kept on a hot chuck, or you can use the embedded micro heater to give the particular temperature. And this is connected to a multimeter where you see the resistance of the sensing film. And this is controlled by the MFCs. And you have a vacuum chamber exhaust if it is required to suck the gas from the chamber. Okay. Now, what a typical gas characteristic look like? So this is a typical response from a reducing gas. You see, this is the baseline. When you put the air, then you apply the gas, which is your target gas, and resistance drops. Then this gets saturated, and after some time you remove the gas and only air is flushed. So then this comes back to normal position. So this time from gas insertion to 90% of the response is called the response time. And the time from once you take off the gas and 90% of the baseline is called the recovery time. Okay, and the response is calculated as the delta R by R naught, where you calculate the change in resistance divided by initial resistance. This is the response value. So by the characteristic curve, we can calculate the response time, recovery time, all these parameters from the characteristic curve. Okay. Now, it is also important to understand what is the operating temperature for that particular gas and sensing film combination. So, try to optimize the response at different temperatures. You set different temperature and get the response for a fixed concentration and see at what temperature you are getting the maximum response. So, at which temperature you are getting the maximum response is called the operating temperature. Okay. Once you characterize this, then you operate your sensor at that particular temperature only. You also calculate the response time and recovery time. As you increase the temperature, the response will be faster and recovery will also be faster. As you can easily understand, as you increase the temperature, adsorption and desorption will be faster because the dynamics of the gas will increase. Okay, the rate kinetics will increase. Reaction rate will increase basically. So once you increase the temperature, it will adsorb faster, it will dissolve faster. So response time as well as the recovery time will be faster. But if you increase the temperature, your response is further decreasing. So you have to get the lowest response and recovery time as well as maximum response. So you have to trade off between response and recovery time as well as the response value, and you have to set the temperature accordingly. Then you see the repeatability of the sensor. You apply the same concentration of gas multiple times and see if your sensor is repeatable. If you see over here, this is very repeatable sensor. Okay. Then you see the response at different concentration values so that you can generate the calibration curve. Okay. So these are different characterizations important for sensing complete gas sensor. So I told you the characterization for micro heater, then separately for sensing film, And now the complete gas sensor testing. What are the important testing graphs you should generate to know the complete gas sensor? Okay, this was all about the gas sensor, how to make it, what are the different parameters. Now we'll discuss what are the opportunities in this particular area, where we should target in our future. So air quality monitoring, this is very important area nowadays. Most like thanks to COVID, now the pollution is not that much, but earlier the pollution was very alarming. You must know about the Delhi condition, Bombay condition, and all other areas. The pollution was very high. So this area is always an area of interest for all of us. Okay, so you can make very good sensors for air quality monitoring. Now, another area is leak detection in various industries. So if I give the specific examples, you can consider the refrigerating the industries, where they make the ice making industries, where they keep refrigerated items. For refrigeration, they use ammonia most of the times. So this gives very low temperature, and if the ammonia is leaked, so it will create havoc. So it is very important to have leak detections at the right place. Okay. Again, food quality assessment. This is very interesting area which is coming in the future. So why it is important? Your fruits or vegetables at different stages of ripening. Please listen carefully. At different stages of ripening, these emits different gases. For example, if a fruit or vegetable is rotten, it will emit H2S gas. And if it is not, if it is fresh, there will not be any H2S. Okay. So if you measure the correct concentration of H2S, and CO is also emitted, and if you measure the concentration of these two gases properly, you can get the idea of freshness of the fruit or vegetables. So you can estimate the shelf life of the fruit vegetables. So this is a very important area in the future. Another area I was talking about, the breath analysis for disease diagnostics. So why it is important? When we exhale our breath, there are so many biomarkers in our breath which can tell us about our health condition. For example, acetone in our breath gives the idea of diabetes. So if you can detect acetone in a very low concentration, you can tell non-invasively that is a person is diabetic or not. You don't need to prick the blood from the finger. You can easily tell by just exhaling and if you are diabetic or not, or what is the concentration of glucose in your blood. Okay. Another one is NOx concentration is related to lung disease. So if there is varying level of NOx in your breath, that means you have lung disease. Ammonia, on the other hand, tells about kidney failures, kidney disease. Okay. So this is just to give an idea that from breath itself, we can tell about the disease or health condition of a particular person. Okay. So this is very important area. Now, what are the facilities available at CSRCD? Most of you may know it, and these are we have a good clean room available over here, and we have lithography, etching, deposition methods, and deposition techniques available. Characterization facilities are there. Electrical characterization, XRD, Raman, AFM, SCM, all these facilities are there. These are some images from the lab. That's all from my side. Thank you. Now I'll take a few questions.
Sir, I have one clarification.
Yeah, sure.
Very nice presentations. First of all, I thank you for your nice presentations and excellent and informative work carried out by you.
Thank you, Sunny.
This
Thank you.
sensor is only used for sensing or quantitative measurements analysis, sir?
Sorry, come again.
It is only for detecting the gas, or we can able to determine the amount of gas present in a sample.
Okay, very good question. So basically, you're talking about qualitative and quantitative measurement.
Yeah, yes.
So, okay, this can be used for both the cases. Okay, so you can give a yes/no kind of alarm. Is present or not? And as I told you earlier, the change in resistance is proportional to the gas concentration.
Oh.
Okay. So the amount of change in concentration is directly proportional to the concentration of the gas. So it can also can help you quantify the gas concentration. So it can help you in both ways.
And one more clarification, whether the sensor selectively detect a particular gas, or how to analyze the selectivity of the gas sensor.
Okay, so selectivity is very important area which people are working since most of the times. Now, selectivity is normally achieved by different dopants. Okay, so you dope different metals, noble metals, or highly sensitive metals in the metal oxide, so that it has affinity to particular gas only. For example, you want to work on hydrogen-based gases. In that particular thing, you will add palladium to your metal oxide. Okay. If you talk about CO, such as CO, you add gold in your metal oxides. So there are different ways to tune this selectivity, and it is mostly done by the dopants. Okay.
Okay. Sir, and the final one. Suppose we are synthesizing sensing film like zinc oxide based or SnO2 based material. Is it possible to carry out sensing device characterizations in your lab?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
If we have available that gas, we have that gas available, we can use that.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, sir. Hello,
Yeah.
sir. Dr.
Yes,
Raghu,
yes.
sir. Yes,
Yes.
first of all, I would like to thank you for your informative session.
Yeah. Just a minute. I'm getting call from us.
Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Sir.
Yeah,
Sir,
sorry.
okay, sir, no problem.
Hmm.
Rahul sir, just in the gas sensor, what is that operating temperature limit? What is lowest operating temperature for particularly for a CO gas sensor, CO2, SOX like that?
Okay.
And
So
what is
this.
the minimum temperature, maximum temperature limit? Okay, minimum
Okay.
temperature.
I got your point. Okay. So this basically depends on the adsorption capability of the sensing film. Okay.
Okay,
So if
sir.
you talk about thin films, not 2D materials, only thin films. So these thin films are not very good absorption, not provide very good absorption for the materials, gases. Okay. That's
Okay.
why we need to elevate the temperature a little bit. Now this may range from 100 to 450 degrees centigrade.
Okay.
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 100 to 450 degrees centigrade. This is the typical range.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. But if you talk about 2D materials or composites, there this adsorption capability is very high, and even at the room temperature, you can get the sensitivity.
Yes.
Okay. So if you talk about
Okay.
normal metal oxide films, so 100 to 450. But if you talk about composites, polymer inorganic composites, or 2D materials, you can have a gas sensor even without micrometer.
Sure. That is, my point is, suppose if you have a air quality monitoring in Jammu and Kashmir area, whether these sensors will support our system.
Okay, if that is a concern, that is a different issue.
Okay.
Okay. So in that particular case, what you do, you keep a temperature sensor outside the box that takes the ambient temperature, and accordingly that will adjust the micrometer temperature.
Sure.
So in closed loop, that can maintain the temperature which is required. If it is required 200, it will give 200 in Jammu Kashmir, it will give 200 in Rajasthan.
Okay, sir.
So that is system problem. That is different issue.
Representation. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, sir, for your informative.
Yes,
I have few queries. My first question is, as you have mentioned, when we increase the temperature, response and recovery improve due to absorption and diffusion kinetics, as you have mentioned in your talk. But after increasing the temperature for a particular value, why the response and recovery curve is taking too long, or it is going too slow? As you have mentioned, for improving the response, have given the reason why it is going to improve response and recovery kinetics. But after a particular value of temperature, you didn't mention the reason why it is going to slow down.
Why it's going to slow down?
Response and recovery is going to slow after a particular temperature, after optimized temperature. Why? What is the reason?
Basically it's basically most of the times absorption and desorption is based on diffusion, right? Yeah. So it will adsorb on the surface, it will diffuse to the material, again it will diffuse back and dissolve. Okay. Now once you increase the temperature, reaction kinetics are driven by the kinetic energy of the material. Okay. And once the temperature is sufficient, then that is governed not by the kinetics of the gas, that is governed by the diffusion.
Okay.
So if kinetic energy is sufficient, it will not. It will take the same time to respond. That is the minimum value basically. If it is taking that much time to respond, that will take that much time all the time. Okay. And if you hit that minimum value, that will saturate that after that. So it will not reduce further because, for example, I come to you and talk to you for some time. I give you some information. For example, if I have 3 words to communicate to you, okay?
Yes, sir.
So these three words I can communicate to you. If I come fast to you, I can communicate and go.
Yes,
But that communication period will not be affected by my coming and going. Okay.
okay.
That is the
Yes, sir.
minimum time that is required. Once that is there, if you reach that, if you reduce the communication time, the transportation time, but
Okay.
communication time will always be there. The
Okay.
reaction time will always be there. Okay.
Okay.
So that is the deadline. After that, it will not reduce. That is the reason after a certain temperature, it will be saturated at a particular value and it will not reduce further in both the cases, recovery time and recovery response time.
Okay. So as you have mentioned that diffusion, you have
Right.
linked with grain boundaries, diffusion of
Right.
gas molecules into the grain boundary, as you mentioned.
Very correct. Very
But
correct.
you have mentioned if more grain boundaries are there, more sensing performance will improve. But
Right.
as we go through a picture, mostly related to the MOS2, we see that for a single crystal of MOS2, we are getting higher response as compared to the more polycrystalline MOS2 is there. Why?
Right. Now, if you talk about 2D materials, there the physics is different. If you talk about grain boundaries
Yeah.
and talk about thin film type of structures, the diffusion in the bulk, it is important to have Debye length of what to say, the grain size should be comparable to the Debye length.
Violent.
You understand what is Debye length, right?
Yeah, I know. Sir.
When there is a adsorption of the gas, there is depletion of the grains, and up to what distance the depletion is taking place, that distance is called the Debye length, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And if your grain size is comparable to Debye length, you get the maximum sensitivity. This is the physics in thin films.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but it MOS2, this is not governed by the grain boundaries. Mostly, it is governed by the structure of MOS2, as well as there are already more sites available on the MOS2 for sensing.
Okay.
That's why it gives you more sensitivity even without elevating the temperature. So you don't need to have polycrystalline nature in 2D materials.
Okay.
Okay. In thin films, you need to have polycrystalline nature, but in 2D materials, it's not.
Okay. So if we left the MOS2 and if we compare our thin film, just like if we have deposited WO3 by deposition system, or any physical vapor deposition system, and we synthesize WO2 by our hydrothermal method. So
WO3.
and
Okay.
we make WO3. Let's take WO3. So when we deposited WO3 physical vapor deposition system or metal deposition system, we get higher grain boundaries at the actually surface, but we get less response for that material. But when we synthesize WO3 by hydrothermal method, we get higher response.
No. In that particular case, what happens if you are getting less response for even for the higher grain boundaries? That means in one case you are getting high surface area due to the roughness. Okay.
Actually, I'm thinking porosity also matter there. Porosity will matter there. Porosity,
exactly,
because if
this is what I'm telling.
you
This
can
is what
say
I'm
density
telling.
is there.
This is what I'm telling. No? So if you
play a role,
if you have two samples, one has less grain
Okay.
boundaries, one have more grain boundaries, and the one which has less grain boundaries is giving you more response. This is what you are telling. Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay, that will happen only when you have more surface area for this one, which is giving which has less grain boundaries. Even then, it has more surface area. That may be the reason because you have grown it using different technique, and
sir, different.
there are porosity and there is roughness of the surface. There is porosity means more surface area. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Porosity means more surface area, or roughness means more surface area. So even if you have surface roughness or porosity, you will get the more surface area. More surface area means better response. Okay.
Okay.
So these things will. So you can say grain boundaries are less, but even then you are getting more response. That can happen But that this will not happen if all the other parameters are same. All the other parameters, please be careful. If all
Yes,
the
sir.
other parameters, deposition method, the thickness, the grain size, all the other grain size, everything is the same, and only the number of grain boundaries is high. In that particular case, you will get the better response for higher grain boundaries. Okay, but here you're
Yes.
changing the method. If you're changing the method, you'll get different surface area. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got it. I got it. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking so good questions.
Yeah, any other questions from audience? Please ask. Okay, there is no any questions. So thank you so much, sir, for your
Thank you very much.
wonderful
It was
talk.
very nice talk. Yeah, it was very interactive. Nice to hear so many questions. It is like very interesting for me.
Yes, sir.
So see like so much interest in the audience. Thank you so much for such a great audience and such a good arrangement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presence. And have a good day, sir.
You too.
Thank you.